I didn't want this job. I never wanted to be a lawyer.
What I think was really frustrating is to see how much bad representation there was out there.
And I never wanted any family to feel how I felt right then.
Welcome to Counselor, Beyond Conventional Defense.
Good morning, everyone. This is William Pernick, and
Hi, I'm Emily Kohler.
Emily and I have known each other for a long time. We've known each other for probably, 15 years now?
Yeah.
And we ran into each other at a conference here in Monterey, started having a conversation, and I'm really glad that you agreed to join us to talk about some of the things we've been learning and internalizing and discussing.
Well, thank you for having me. I'm a little bit nervous, but excited.
So, Emily, you and I were having a conversation earlier today about the different roads that brought us to the practice of law.
Yes.
And, for me, I didn't realize until much later into being an attorney that this is what I always meant to be doing in life. Like going into it, I didn't really know. And I think for the first half of my life, I was fighting it. And I was trying to pursue almost everything else under the sun. But it was not until I became a lawyer, became a criminal defense attorney, and have now been doing it for almost 20 years that I realized that this is what I was meant to do all along. I know this was not the experience for you.
Definitely not. So I think I'm a little bit differently situated as an attorney, especially one doing criminal defense, where I didn't want this job. I never wanted to be a lawyer. I wanted to go to beauty school and do makeup, which I'm very good at my job. But I think it's because of how I got here that it makes me so passionate and has led me down this road. And now I don't think I could do anything else. And there have been times in my career where I've thought about changing or have resented how I got here. But really, at the end of the day, it makes me who I am. It is what makes me such a strong advocate. How I essentially got into it is I have an older brother who was an 18-year-old kid, got into some trouble with friends doing stupid shit. And this group of friends ultimately committed some robberies. My brother refused to tell on his friends, and he would not give up who these last few outstanding members were. Which
is not uncommon in our line of work. We deal with kids who refuse to fully cooperate all the time.
Right. And in his mind, he thought, I'm kind of going down this shit path and I'm not going to really do anything. And why would I ruin this one kid's life where he's about to have a child, or this other person where he has a college scholarship or things like that? My brother was kind of doing nothing with his life. And so my parents hired a private attorney because never being involved in this, there was this stigma of this public pretender. I mean, we hear it all the time. And my parents didn't want that for him. They wanted this best chance, best case scenario. He was definitely never going to get away scot-free, but they wanted to minimize his exposure of what he was looking at as this kid.
Now, at this point, you are how old?
So at the time when he is 18 committing the crimes, he gets arrested right when he's 20 years old. I'm 15.
And so you're just starting high school, just going into ninth grade?
Yes. So I'm in between 8th grade to 9th grade year. Article in the paper about the big arrest made. That's how I started. In fact, I remember the day the newspaper article came out, I was picking up my schedule for my freshman year of high school. And I thought, oh my God, this is so embarrassing. These people are going to see, that's my brother. And so, but even in that moment, that's not when I realized I wanted to be a lawyer. He was fighting the case. And so ultimately, my parents hired this attorney who was almost a used car salesman. He said what you thought he should say, and we didn't really know any better. We'd never been in this situation. And he took this vulnerable family and preyed on it, and
which is unfortunately pretty easy to do, because when people come to us, they come in their worst moment in life. They're super vulnerable, as you said. And so you have a lot of power and a lot of responsibility when you're meeting with folks, when you're having these conversations. People are so desperate, and it is true that unfortunately some people take advantage of that vulnerability.
Right. And you put not only your trust, but your family's trust, your money, your livelihood, everything into this person. And that's what my parents did. And because it was such poor representation, my brother ended up getting totally screwed. He got a 20-year sentence. We did not think he was anywhere near that, even up until the point he was handcuffed and taken out of the courtroom in front of my parents, and in that moment, watching him get handcuffed and seeing my mom and my dad collapse and crumble, my dad, frontline Marine in Vietnam, bigger than life, manly of man, kind of personality, crumble to a sobbing, literally had to be drug up off the floor. And I never wanted any family to feel how I felt right then. And so my dreams of beauty school went out the window. And I ultimately, the more I dug into it, the more I said, I have to do this. I have to be a lawyer. I never want some family to feel how it felt that day, because it's not just my brother who suffers. It's not just my brother who went to prison. It's not just him who's serving time. It is this whole concept of how it affects your family dynamic and all the suffering that we all went through because of it.
And, I have admired you for many years. I know you and I have met in Tulare County, where both of us, before we went into private practice, we were public defenders in this really unique legal environment where in the middle of nowhere, we had just a collection of really extraordinary individuals who were bound together not by pay, because the pay was crap. Pretty much everyone had this feeling of like, what are you going to do? You're going to fire me? You're going to fire me from this job that's so hard, that pays so little? Do your worst. And so, and we had great leadership, and you started a little bit after me, but I was very, very lucky, because when I started in that office, we still had a generation of lawyers. And I think some of them were around during your time, but there was this generation of lawyers who haven't retired yet. They were about to retire. And so they didn't necessarily want to do as much, work in the trenches, but they were really happy to talk about it, to mentor younger lawyers, to inspire them. One of them is, someone who did my first felony trial, who's no longer with us, my friend Dave. I'm saying this and I get goosebumps thinking about my friend. And sometimes I do things as a lawyer today, and I will ask myself, how would Dave, view something that I do? I wish he was here to see this. Like if something really awesome happens, I sometimes do that. But we were very lucky. I feel very fortunate that I received that mentorship and the training. And so we had an opportunity to do a lot of cases. We got really diverse experience with very complex cases, far, I think, in excess of what our, experience as lawyers was at the time. We were handling, you were handling some very serious cases on your second year of practicing law?
Not even, yeah. I would only been an attorney a year and was already in felonies, and Tulare County has no shortage of felonies. So, I was doing homicides and 288s, attempt murders, gang-heavy county, very gang-heavy county. Yeah, you were in the trenches there. And I think it was a great office. I think that is by far, even in any county I've been to, that was by far the best office I've ever seen. The camaraderie of that office, how we all learned from each other's experiences and different things that we just learned, and how we would talk standing in the hallway by the offices, and you could just bounce ideas off of people. That office was the best, and it catapulted me into how far I took it. And that, I kind of feel like I took that culture with me to other offices I went.
And I did the same thing. I say to my younger lawyers the things that my mentors in that office used to say to me. And I think the shared passion for helping others is something that was instilled in us, instilled early. We had to get super creative because we didn't really have much money or resources to do all of the things that we wanted to do as lawyers. And yet, what I think was really frustrating is to see how much bad representation there was out there.
It still makes me sick. Like, I'm talking not in my throat, sweaty palms. There have been times where I have been in counties where I just stand up and I just do the whole, as a friend of the court, Your Honor.
Sure.
Because I just can't stand by and let that happen.
Sure.
It's disgusting.
I agree with you. I have the same experience in one of the small counties in our area, which does not have a dedicated public defender's office, really short supply of talent. And at least a couple of years ago, what passed for public representation there for indigent defense would make any one of us who grew up, I think, in a real public defender's office sick to our stomachs. So you and I met when I just left Tulare County Public Defender's Office. You were just hired there. But learning your story and what brought you to the practice of law is something that made me admire you back then. And it kind of, only increased over time as I watched the work that you do, the difference that you make, and how you've taken your personal journey and you have turned it into a point of strength, and you've built on it to reach out and touch other people and help other people.
Thank you. There's days where it doesn't feel like that. Like I said, there were moments. So ultimately, my brother did 19 years, 4 months, actual time in prison on a level 4 yard the entire time. And there were moments where I resented him. I resented my career choice. I felt like almost like my life's path was chosen for me. Like I didn't get a say in it. And then, you have those bad days and then you look back and you think, I couldn't do anything. Part of my problem, I don't know how you are, but as an attorney, I have a very hard time with letting go.
I have a lot of problems.
But like letting go and letting somebody else do the work. And so that is something that I also put on my own shoulders is if I didn't do this, who would? Like, what if they got that shitty lawyer? Or what if this young defendant just gets railroaded because somebody doesn't put in the effort or doesn't care? Even though I have my bad days, I could not imagine doing anything else.
You mentioned something earlier that really struck a chord with me. And you said that you feel like almost this life has been chosen for you and you didn't get to have a say in it.
Yeah.
That maybe you wanted to enjoy your life, being a young woman, going to beauty school or doing whatever else you wanted to and not do this super serious work that comes at, let's be frank about it, with significant personal, emotional costs.
Yeah.
I'm convinced you feel the same way. But for me, I feel like every day I carry a very heavy burden of responsibility for other people.
Yes.
And so, when you say you don't feel like this life was one that you chose, it's very interesting because I feel the same way. You feel like life events forced you to go down this path. And I feel like most of my life, I was fighting, doing what I was meant to do. And I think a number of years ago, looking back at some of the work that I've done, the lives that have been changed, despite, these costs that you and I have talked about, I realized that this is who I am. This is what I was put on earth to do. And sort of once I've accepted that, it just aligned everything else in my life. It hasn't made me happier, but at least I stopped fighting it. But when I look back at, different parts of my past, I realized that almost, I don't want to sound strange saying it, but I feel like all of these different areas of my life from childhood have prepared me to be who I've grown into today. Like I remember when I was probably the same age as my son today. I think I was probably 8 or 9 years old. I was walking home, and this was in Ukraine, in a small town on the western border of Ukraine with Romania, where I grew up. So we're talking, probably mid-1980s to late 1980s. And I remember walking home and finding a man who was bleeding out. And so I came home, I summoned help, they got paramedics, this person was, given medical attention. And I don't think I had like the maturity or the capacity to process that at a super young age, I was responsible for potentially saving someone's life.
Right.
Like they talked about it, my parents talked about it, obviously they were, proud of it, maybe somebody mentioned something in school, but it didn't really, I don't think I had like the maturity to process what a significance that carried, but that happened when I was, like I said, a young person. When I was in school, I was bullied because I was fat, and so like a lot of kids, I was an immigrant kid, came to this country and got pretty heavy on microwave burritos and other processed food that we didn't quite have, growing up where I was. And so, I've experienced some of that. And then later on, I became a personal trainer, but I would focus on working with people who had medical conditions, people who were in car accidents, people who had diabetes. I told all of my clients, I lost a ton of weight, I lost like 100 pounds, I got in really good shape, I became a trainer. And so then I would work with clients and I would tell them, if you have a child who's obese, I will train him for free. So all of these like random things, I don't think I've ever talked to anybody about it actually before, but all of these random things in my past, when I look at them, I can see how in some ways they were almost a training ground they were preparing me to do the work that I do today, which is focused in very significant part on helping people who have mental health issues and substance abuse issues. I went to college thinking I wanted to be a psychologist.
But I think that even now, with even being an attorney, I think that is a hard part of our job, is to realize how much of an impact we have on people. You know, how much, just because I read that one extra thing or put in that extra phone call or got that different expert, we don't actually realize how much we help people until you can take that step back. And, you know, even one of the things we were talking about this morning is, you know, you now are looking more into the mental health side of cases and things like that, and looking at why do people commit this crime or what made that happen. And I think just even for you to look at that and figure that out, but you don't realize how much you just helped somebody by
100%.
asking them, why did you do this? What made you do this particular thing? Or how did you get into this? You know, we get these cases when they have already come to us and they've already lived this life that put them in that situation. And no one actually tries to figure it out with just kind of like putting a Band-Aid on a bullet hole, you know, and until you actually get to the root of it. And so I think that it's not just these moments from childhood, you know, different things, same experience, car accidents where I've saved people, things like that. You know, you have this in a fight or flight situation. I am a fighter. I will go to the mat every time. And until you actually look at all of these moments in your life, you don't realize kind of the effect, like, what is it? The butterfly effect, isn't that movie where like one thing changed all these other things? And I think that is something that we still do every day and don't realize it.
And I think what makes it really painful sometimes, because we're so acutely aware of how much difference a little bit of extra effort can make when things don't work out the way we had hoped for. When you put yourself out there fully, when you are, you know, when you have gone all out in front of a jury or in a motion hearing or in an argument in court and it did not work, and you really are, in many ways, you know, you're vulnerable to being really drawn back into your shell and blaming yourself. Had I only looked at this one issue, had I only reread the file one more time, and it's like this infinite amount of things that we can do on a lot of these cases, especially as it gets more and more complex, you can really question yourself a lot.
Oh, absolutely. Had I papered that judge? Had I kicked that one juror? Had I presented this a little bit better? Or did I hit this hard enough in my closing? I mean, some of the cases that haunt me to this day were things where I have a pinpoint thing I could have done in my mind that would have changed the whole outcome of that case.
Like the best closing argument you deliver is the one that keeps you up at night, the night after you have delivered one already, and now the jury is out and deliberating.
Yes, and you think of all the things you should have, could have, would have said. Absolutely. Exactly. But I think that also is what makes us so good at our job. I think the day that you are not afraid to walk into that jury trial, the day you don't second guess yourself, the day that you don't think of, oh, I could have done more, I should have said more in that deliberation period, is the day you don't care. And the day you don't care is the day you need to hang it up.
Thanks for watching. Be sure to hit that like and subscribe button and leave us a review in the comments.